האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening, Dobra Vayetzei. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Vayetzei. We're going to do Os Chaf Beis, section number 22. This, before we begin, we're going to take a look at a pasuk right towards the end of the Parsha. As a matter of fact, it's the second Parsha from the last pasuk in the Parsha. What's happening in our story is that Lavan and Yaakov Avinu have made peace. And Lavan leaves to go home, and it says, this pasuk tells us what happens with Yaakov. Pasuk, Perek Lamed Beis, pasuk Beis. Ve'Yaakov holach ledarko, and Yaakov went on his way, which means he continued returning to Eretz Canaan, to the land of Avraham and Yitzchak. Vayifkeu vo malachei Elokim. And angels of Hashem encountered him. That's Perek Lamed Beis, pasuk Beis. So the Zera Shimshon is going to deal with these angels, these malachim. He's going to talk about them and what services they provided to Yaakov Avinu. The pasuk says, "Vayifkeu vo malachei Elokim." Angels of Hashem encountered Yaakov Avinu, v'chulei, etc. Hikshu hameforshim. The meforshim asked, what was the need for these angels? If Hashem had already promised Yaakov Avinu, this comes from the beginning of the Parsha, and behold, I am with you and will guard you. So the question is a very obvious one. If Hashem has given Yaakov a promise that Hashem, is going to protect Yaakov and guard him, why do we need malachim meeting Yaakov when he returns to Eretz Canaan? And we know that these malachim were there to protect him when he entered Eretz Canaan. Why did he need malachim, angels, if he had Hashem's protection? V'hasam nami kasha. And over there also in the beginning of our Parsha, in the beginning of Parshas Vayetzei, where Yaakov has the famous dream, Mashe Kosev, what's written, V'hinei malachei Elokim olim v'yordim. The angels of Hashem were going up the ladder and coming down the ladder, v'chulei, etc. V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, and Hashem was standing over him, v'chulei, etc. Trei shmiros lomali. Why did Yaakov need two protections that are talked about in the beginning of the Parsha? In Yaakov's dream, he sees a ladder, a sulam, which is placed on the ground, and the top of the ladder is going up towards Shamayim, and malachim are going up and down. And Rashi tells us, quoting Chazal, that what he was seeing was the malachim who were protecting him in Eretz Canaan, leaving him and going back to Shamayim. And the malachim who were now going to protect him when he left Eretz Canaan and went out into Chutz La'aretz, these were the malachim that would protect him in Chutz La'aretz. So he had malachim to protect him, and they were doing kind of an exchanging of the guard. But the pasuk says Hashem nitzav alav. Hashem is guarding him and protecting him. So it's the same question. If Hashem is guarding and protecting Yaakov Avinu, what does he need malachim for? What does he need the protection of angels for? Continuing, v'yesh lomar, and we can say, the shmiras hamalachim hu davar echad, being guarded by angels, the protection that angels provide is one thing. Ushmiras hakodesh baruch hu davar acher, and the protection that Hashem provides is a different thing. It's not the same thing. So that's the root, the core of the answer. When we wonder, when we ask, as the Zera Shimshon has done, why would Yaakov need the protection of malachim if he had the protection of Hashem? So the answer is that those two protections are not the same thing. They're not equivalent. They're not identical. They have differences between them. So in fact, it does make sense for Yaakov Avinu to need both the protection of Hashem and the malachim. And this, of course, doesn't just apply to Yaakov Avinu. It can apply to people in general. The cross ksiv, because a pasuk in Tehillim writes, Ki malochav yitzave loch lishmorcha. He commands his malachim, his angels, to guard you, v'chule. Ve'achar kach mesayim, and later on, a pasuk, the parak actually concludes, Ki vi chashak va'afaltehu asagvehu. In me, he had a desire to serve me, Hashem says, and I will protect him and elevate him. V'hachinami kasha. So we have the same question on these psukim in Tehillim. Matzorech l'shnei shmiros. Why would a person need both the protection of malachim and the protection of Hashem? That's our core question. Next paragraph. Aval ha'inyon hu. But the answer is, or the concept is, shahamalachim hamishamrim es ha'adam. Malachim who protect a person. Heim hamalachim shenivra'u. B'masim tovim shel ha'adam. Those are the malachim who were created through the good deeds, the mitzvos of the person. V'chova aleihem. It's obligatory on those malachim, continuing to the next page, column on the right, lishmor es ha'adam shebera'am, to guard and protect the person who created them, who brought them into being, mikol pigoyim roim, from all bad occurrences, bad events. Ubishvil hanoah shmira zo, and because of this benefit of the protection from the malachim, ein menaken es ha'adam mizuchuyosov. A person does not lose his merits. A person's merits, his zechuyos, are not reduced because of the protection of these malachim. V'gam elu hamalachim lo yatzilu es ha'adam b'derech nes. These malachim do not protect a person in a miraculous fashion, rak b'derech teva, only through natural means. So let's pause to understand what the Zera Shimshon is teaching us, because he's teaching us several points, 3 points to be exact, about the protection given by malachim to people. Number one, he says the malachim that protect people are malachim that were created by a person's mitzvah observance. This is based on a teaching, a Mishnah actually in Masechet Avos, the famous Pirkei Avos, where we see, according to Chazal, that when a person does a mitzvah, a malach comes into being, and the Zera Shimshon says that malach has an obligation to protect the person whose mitzvah fulfillment brought the malach into existence. So that's number one. That's where the malach comes from, who's protecting, that is charged with protecting a person. Number two, this malach will not perform a miracle to protect a person. He will only protect a person within the framework of derech hateva, of the natural order. And number three, having the protection of the malach does not in any way decrease a person's zechuyos. Sometimes, if something special is done for a person, then it can decrease and reduce a person's zechuyos, as we'll see in a little bit. But the protection by these malachim and within the framework of derech hateva, of the natural order, does not in any way deduct from a person's zechuyos, a person's merits. Continuing. Ve'al shmira zo amrinon bereish baba kama. On this type of protection from these malachim, it says in Gemara Baba Kama in the first parak, Adam de isle mazola, a person who has mazol, which the Zera Shimshon is here understanding to mean angelic protection. Ksiv Bey, it is written in the Torah about a person. V'chiyigach, when an ox will gore a person, v'chule, etc. So here, because the Zera Shimshon only gives us a little excerpt from the Gemara, we need to pause to understand what the Gemara is saying over there. The Gemara asks about the fact that when the Torah talks about an ox goring a person and an ox goring another ox, it changes the word that's used to describe the ox attacking either the person or the other animal. When it talks about the ox attacking a person, it says v'chiyigach shor, when an ox will gore a person, which of course is the most direct attack that an ox can do to a person. It'll gore the person. But when the Torah talks about an ox attacking another ox, it says v'chiyigof shor, when an ox will push another ox. And so the Gemara asks, why does it change the word? Use one word for when an ox attacks a person and a different word for when an ox attacks another animal. And the Gemara answers, because a person has mazola, angelic protection, and therefore for an ox to kill a person, there's going to be a need to be a much more direct, much more violent attack. Whereas for an ox to kill another ox, which lacks angelic protection, leisle mazola, it doesn't have angelic protection. So then the Torah uses a lower level word because it doesn't need such a violent direct attack to kill another ox. So that's the Zera Shimshon references that Gemara, because we see the Gemara talks about this concept that a person can have angelic protection, which is what the Zera Shimshon is talking about. Omnam, however, Shmiras HaKodesh Baruch Hu Moelis Yoser, the protection from Hashem is more effective. Shematziles Adam af bederech nes, because Hashem's protection can rescue a person even in a miraculous manner. Ela kishe'osen nes la'adam, however, when Hashem saves a person in a miraculous way, then a person's merits are reduced, are deducted from. K'di amrinim b'perek beis de Shabbos, as Chazal say in the second chapter of Masechet Shabbos. So here we see the differences, the beginning of the differences between protection from Malachim and protection from Hashem. If you're talking about protection from Malachim, it's going to be derech hateva. It's going to be within the framework of the natural order. It's not going to be miraculous. And number two, it's not going to deduct from the person's zechuyos, the person's merits. However, the Zera Shimshon is contrasting that with protection from Hashem. Protection from Hashem is more advantageous on the one hand because Hashem will even protect a person and rescue a person in a miraculous manner. On the other hand, it will deduct from the person's zechuyos, whereas the protection from the malachim, albeit less potent, less powerful, will not deduct from the person's zechuyos. So already we're beginning to clearly see the differences between protection from Hashem and protection from malachim. They're not the same thing. They're not identical, which is the Zera Shimshon's entire thesis here that he wants to explain to us and share with us to show us why Yaakov Avinu needed the protection of both malachim and Hashem, because they complement each other. They're not identical. They're not redundant. And a person can benefit from both of the different types of shmira from the malachim and shmira from protection from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Next paragraph. Umishum hachi, and because of this, al yelech adam b'makom sakana, a person in general should not put himself or herself into a dangerous situation. Shema ein osin lo nes, because perhaps a miracle will not be done for the person. Perhaps this person does not deserve to receive a miraculous intervention from Hashem. V'im osin, and if the miracle is done, menakin, then the person's merits will be reduced, which is not beneficial for a person. V'chule, etc. And when a person who is an extraordinarily righteous individual is promised from Hashem, that Hashem will be with this righteous individual and everything, guard him in everything and everywhere that he goes and everything that he does. Similar to Hashem's promise to Yaakov Avinu in the beginning of our Parsha. Zos hahavtocha moeles sheyochol Yaakov lechatchila laleches bimkom sakana. A promise like that, an extraordinary promise from Hashem to a righteous individual that Hashem will guard and watch this person, as Hashem said to Yaakov Avinu, that meant that Yaakov Avinu could put himself in a dangerous situation and rely on the promise of Hashem. Because of Hashem's promise, he would definitely do a miracle. And this miracle, not only would Hashem do a miracle to save Yaakov Avinu, but the miracle would not deduct or reduce mizuchu Yosef from Yaakov Avinu's merit. Because if it was Hashem's intention to only do a miracle for Yaakov, if it lessened his merits, ein zo havtacha tova, that would not have been a good promise in Yaakov Avinu's eyes. Yaakov Avinu was very makbid, was very particular about his merits, his zechuyos, and would not have wanted them to be reduced. So Zera Shimshon says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's promise to Yaakov was truly extraordinary. Number one, it allowed Yaakov Avinu to be somech al hanes, lechatchila, to actually go into dangerous situations, knowing that Hashem would guard him and protect him, even if it required a miracle to be protected from the danger. And number two, if Hashem did do a miracle for Yaakov Avinu to guard him and protect him, it would not reduce from Yaakov's zechuyos, from Yaakov Avinu's merit. Both of these things were very unique and particular to this situation in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu made special promises to Yaakov Avinu. Next paragraph. Ve'af al gav, and even though shekesheyesh shmiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when there is protection from Hashem, ein sorech l'shmiras hamalachim, when you have protection from Hashem similar to what Yaakov Avinu had, which means you don't have the normal protection from Hashem, you have the super advanced protection from Hashem ultra, meaning Hashem will do miracles to you and it's guaranteed, and you can even walk right into dangerous situations, and this will not reduce your merits. When you have that kind of premium protection from Hashem, then you certainly don't need any additional protection from Malachim. Im kol zeh, nonetheless, hoil shenivru bizechuso, since the Malachim were created in the person's merit, meaning by the person doing mitzvos, yesh lahem leilech imo, the Malachim still are obligated to accompany the person. Ushmirasim oz eina ella, and their protection is only like kemo ashmira shahoyu osim bebeis hamikdash. It's like the fact that there used to be guard duty in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash, hakohanim v'haLeviim, done by the Kohanim and the Leviim. Lo shahaya habayis tzarech l'shmira, and this guard duty that was done in the Beis Hamikdash wasn't because the Beis Hamikdash needed to be protected mipnei haganovim behalistim, from thieves and robbers. That's not why there was guard duty in the Beis Hamikdash. Ella, but top of the next column on the left, Ella derech gedula v'chavod. It was a way of showing the greatness and the honor due, the grandeur due in the Beis Hamikdash. K'moshe pirish hara'av b'reish meseches midos v'ayin sham, as is explained by the commentary of the Bartanura, Rabbeinu Ovadia Bartanura, at the beginning of Meseches Midos, the tractate that talks about the measurement of the different rooms and places and things in the Beis Hamikdash, and you can look there. This is a very famous idea. It's not necessarily well known, certainly not sufficiently, that there used to be guard duty in the Beis HaMikdash, but there was. And what the Zera Shimshon is telling us is the guards that were marching around and on guard, on watch in the Beis HaMikdash were not there to stop enemies from attacking, and they were not there to stop people from sneaking in to rob things or steal things. That's not what it was about. It was it was symbolic. It was in order to show the honor and the greatness and the magnificence of and the uniqueness of the Beis HaMikdash. And so therefore, that's why you had the guards there, and that's why the Malachim were guarding Yaakov Avinu, even though he had this extraordinary promise from Hashem. Nonetheless, the Malachim were there as to do a symbolic protection of Yaakov, to honor him and to acknowledge his greatness. Ve'od shebihiyos ha'avera mechaba mitzvah. Another point that we need to take into account is that when a person does an avera, this can extinguish the fact that a person did a mitzvah. Elu hamalachim monin es ha'adam milipol b'chet. So another function of malachim is to protect a person and prevent him from falling into sin. Kedei lahatzil atzma mamish, in order for them to save themselves. The malachim have a vested interest in preventing a person from doing a sin, because if the person does do a sin, it can take away, so to speak, the credit from the mitzvah, and that can wipe out these malachim who were created by the mitzvah that the person did, or by the mitzvos that the person did. So the malachim who were brought into being because a person did a mitzvah, the malach who was brought into existence very much wants to help the person stay away from averos, because the averos can wipe out the mitzvah and thereby wipe out the malach. And the malachim don't want to be pushed away from their place. The malachim are very happy to stay near the person whose good actions brought them into being, and protect that person and honor that person. And they don't want to be swept away because the person committed a sin, a transgression. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu, however, Hashem, afal pi shematzil es ha'adam miyetzer hara, even though Hashem does in fact save people from the yetzer hara, Eino monea mimenu habechira kanoda. Hashem will never prevent a person from having free will, as is well known. So Hashem will never step in and take away a person's bechira, their free choice, in order to make sure that they don't do an aveira. So even though Hashem doesn't want us to do averos, and even though Hashem will help us in our struggles against the yetzer hara, Hashem never prevents us from transgressing. Elamosif koach v'bechiraso hatova. Rather, what Hashem will do is add strength to a person's good choice to make the right decision. So the person still has bechira, the person can still do the right thing or the wrong thing, but Hashem can add some oomph and some power to our ability to make the right choice. V'lochein shmiras hamalachim mo'eles ad shelo yechteh ha'adam. The protection of malachim in some ways can be more beneficial in the sense of protecting a person from sinning than Hashem's protection. V'chevon shechote, if the person does sin, however, nistalka mimenu shmiras hamalachim, then the protection of the malachim is taken away; it's removed. So malachim are working hard to protect us from sinning, but if we sin nonetheless, then we lose the protection from the malachim. Omnam, however, next paragraph, ki behakadosh baruch hu ksiv. Regarding Hashem, the pasuk says, ki kel rachum v'chanun. Hashem is a merciful and compassionate. Hashem is merciful and compassionate. V'hu tole al chata'av shel adam. And Hashem doesn't immediately punish a person. Hashem puts into abeyance. Hashem waits after a person commits a sin in order to allow them a chance to do tshuva. The Hashem doesn't immediately take away the person's protection. L'chach Yaakov misyore. And that's why Yaakov Avinu was afraid. Katonti mikol hachasodim. Yaakov Avinu says, I'm worried that I have been made small from all of these kindnesses that I have received from Hashem. Shema niskalkalti b'chet. Perhaps I have messed things up by committing a sin. Keperish Rashi, as Rashi explained, Shemonea mimeni. Maybe I have prevented myself from receiving Havtochas HaKodesh Baruch Hu, the promise of protection from Hashem. She'eni od ro'oi sheyaseh li nes. Maybe I'm no longer fit for Hashem to do a miracle for me. V'lios nitzol me'odam rasha. For me to be saved, or for any person to be saved from a wicked individual. Shehu bal bechira. This wicked individual is a person who has free will, meaning by definition that this person can harm me if that's what he chooses to do. Tzarech liyos chosid, to have protection from another human being who's a rasha who has free will. You need to be righteous, particularly righteous and worthy. Kedichsiv, as the pasuk in Tehillim says, Shomer nafshos chasidov. Hashem guards the soul of his pious ones, his righteous ones, miyad rishoyim yatzilem. From the hand of the rishoyim, of the wicked, he saves them. So the pasuk in Tehillim clearly illustrates this idea that Yaakov Avinu was concerned about, to be saved from a wicked individual, which was of course the wicked individual that Yaakov had in mind was his brother Esav. To be saved from Esav Harasha, I need special merit. I need to be considered a chassid, a truly righteous individual, a truly pious and worthy individual. And then Hashem will save me from a rasha. But I'm not sure if that's the case. V'zehu, and this is what it means, vayira vayetzer. It says that Yaakov Avinu, on the approach of Esav and his 400 men, Yaakov was afraid and he was distressed. Shehem shtei shmiros. This meant, this double language of afraid and distressed refers to the fact that Yaakov thought he might have lost the two protections that he was given. Shmiras haguf u'shmiras hanefesh, protection in body, meaning physical protection from being harmed or, God forbid, even killed, and protection from the soul from doing something wrong, from sinning. V'zehu shema yehoreg o shema yaharog. And this is what Rashi means when he says that Yaakov's fears were, perhaps I will be killed. And if there's a battle between Yaakov and his family and his servants and Esav and his men, Rashi says that Yaakov thought Shema Yehoreg, maybe I will be killed, O Shema Yaharog, or maybe I will have to kill someone else. And both of those were fears that he had. He didn't want to be killed, of course, so he needed Shmiras Haguf, he needed protection of his body, physical protection, and he needed to have Shmiras HaNefesh. He didn't want to kill anyone in a way or in circumstances that would be sinful. Va'ata amarta heitev etiv imach. Yaakov said to Hashem, you said to me that you will surely do good to me. A double language of tov, heitiv, etiv. Two goodnesses. Klomar, this means to say, Shmiras HaMalachim u'Shmiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem, you said that I would have the two protections, the protection of the Malachim and your protection, Shmiras HaNefesh u'Shmiras HaGuf, which will equal protection from sinning through the Malachim and protection of my physical existence, my life, my survival, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even if it requires a miracle. So the Zera Shimshon has shown us that when we see in the Psukim that there seems to be a need for Yaakov Avinu to have two different types of protection, Shmira from Malachim and shmira from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we might ask, as the Zera Shimshon started off by asking, if Yaakov Avinu had protection from Hashem, why in the world would it be necessary for him to have protection from the Malachim? So the Zera Shimshon developed for us the concept that those two protections from Malachim and from Hashem are not identical. They're not the same thing. They have different kind of strengths and weaknesses, different kinds of elements in particulars to them. And Yaakov Avinu was in a situation where he desperately wished to be reassured that nothing he had done could have led to his protection, both from Malachim and from Hashem, for those protections being reduced in any way. He needed to have all the protections in place, or he wanted to be reassured that all the protections were in place as he met up as he prepared for his encounter with Esav, which required him to be fully protected. Yasher Koch for joining in the Zera Shimshon on this week's Parsha. We look forward, B'ezras Hashem, to learning again together in the Zera Shimshon next week.